Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon now. Good morning, Sister Claire, Sister Christine, Laura Lyon, Julie Edson, faculty, staff, family, and friends. Congratulations. In a regular year, joining together for a commencement is an accomplishment. During a pandemic, it is nothing short of a miracle. Well done to every family member, friend, faculty, and administrator who helped these young women make it across the finish line. And to the class of 2021, you did it. You are high school graduates. Short of committing an actual misdemeanor during the course of this speech, you're pretty much guaranteed to get your diploma. I hope you will relish in the joy of this day. When you're preparing to write a commencement speech at a place like Santa Catalina, one which, if you are like me, has held such incredible esteem in your heart and mind for so many years, one option is to watch a relentless series of YouTube videos of the best graduation speeches of all time. If I may make a gentle suggestion, should you find yourself in this exact situation, do not do this. You may be cowed by the soaring rhetoric, the long, persistent standing ovations, or worse, the harshly critical and misspelled comments that stream below even the very best orations. So I'd like to agree now, at the beginning of this, to keep our expectations in check. I'll do my best as a speaker without the benefit of Oprah's glam squad or speechwriters, and you'll have to agree to politely laugh, even if I'm only marginally funny. I can't adequately express how honored I am to be here, speaking with all of you. A mere 20 years ago, right around this time, I was standing where you are, sporting chunky highlights and some very shiny pastel lip gloss, ready to rush headlong into my future. I was armed, as you are, with some of the tools Catalina gave me that I hadn't yet seen in action in the wild. Surrounded by smart, enterprising, confident women for the 4 years prior to college, it truly gave me pause the first time I saw a male classmate headed to the library. "What are you going to do in there?" I asked him, genuinely surprised that he had plans other than playing video games or watching football. In my mind at the time, only young women were serious scholars, thinkers, and academics. As it turns out, young men do study and do homework. Well, let me not spoil the surprise. Adjusting to male classmates was not the only rapid transition I had to make after graduating from Catalina. Whereas many, if not most young people, enter college with a resolute belief in social justice and convictions around how to make the world kinder and better. When I got there, I was struck almost immediately by how rapidly that focus shifted. The chief hippie vegan co-op leader in my class at Harvard, who I only really knew for his coordination of anti-war protests, shortly after graduation, got a haircut and went to work for a large corporate consulting firm. It's a true story. So did most of my class. Between corporate consulting and investment banking, a majority of my colleagues went on to quickly establish themselves as the prompt inheritors of this country's vast wealth. And I don't want to imply that people did not go on to do meaningful, impactful, important work in these spaces. No doubt many of them did and do now. I simply want to highlight the fact that almost immediately the message was, your talent and intelligence got you here. The smart and strategic thing to do is to immediately monetize that. That was a tough pill for me to swallow. I am the daughter of a migrant farm worker from Mexico, who by virtue of his intelligence and hustle and good luck became a primary care doctor, something he does to this day, catering primarily to Mexican immigrants in my hometown of Salinas. His life was and is one of relentless and uncomplaining service. And as you know, I spent my formative years at Santa Catalina, where I had inculcated in me the sense that with great privilege comes even greater responsibility. As I reflect on how Catalina made its mission so clear to me and my peers, 3 lessons stand out. The importance of broadening my worldview, understanding redemption as essential to the human experience, and recognizing holiness when it was in my midst. You thought I was going to say pre-calculus. When it came to broadening my worldview, My teachers at Catalina had what I can now recognize is a stroke of true genius. They asked me to take my adolescent ennui and contextualize it within the broad landscape of existential philosophers, thinkers, and great writers. "Oh, you think it's hard to have an unrequited crush on a boy that goes to York?" Dr. Murphy seemed to ask. "Try Fear and Trembling on for size. See how a lifetime of perpetually wrestling with the nature of God's love feels." I don't even remember York Boy's name, but I can still quote Kierkegaard. I was asked to take my individual, and some might say inconsequential, experience of suffering and imagine how it might fit into the greater story of all human angst. A powerful sentiment, indeed. While teaching navel-gazing teenagers like me to broaden their worldview seems intuitive, one could argue that the second lesson that Catalina taught me, emphasizing the powerful, redemptive nature of God's love, might be a riskier move. I remember deciding at 17 that my confirmation name would be Augustine. And I'll tell you right now, it was not because of the lifetime of incredible service to God of this famously passionate saint and bishop. It was because of the frankly great time it seemed he had sinning before that. But as it happens, you can't learn the story of St. Augustine's hedonism without learning the story of his road back to a more meaningful life. To hear at such an impressionable time that even a saint misses the mark, maybe even for a long time, it was essential to tolerating my own imperfections in the years to come and knowing there was still a way back. And so when I finally made it out into the world and began making my own decisions about what I wanted my life to look like, it turned out I could only really stray from my path for so long, pulled by an invisible thread back to wondering about meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. It is not uncommon to feel lost when you are figuring your way out in the world. What Catalina taught me was to keep putting stakes in the ground with the confidence that they would eventually mean something. I didn't know for a while what I wanted to do, but I did know that serving others brought me back to a more essential version of myself. These foundations became the cornerstone on which I shaped my career, leading me to emergency medicine and hospice work. This work allows me to remain deeply tethered to the human experience of suffering and do what I can to mitigate it. But what surprised me more than my own individual path to medicine was that as I began paying attention to the careers of my fellow Catalinians, I saw the same pattern emerge. It wasn't just me. I've watched my Catalina classmates go on into so many fields and somehow always arrive back at service. In their day-to-day work, certainly, or at home, fostering children, or by simply refusing to allow a natural erosion of their moral compass in whatever field they pursue. I met an alum a few months ago who does private practice psychiatry in Beverly Hills, a pretty cushy gig if you can get it, I imagine. And because she's a Catalina alum, she spends 3 mornings a week at a nursing home across town in a neighborhood ravaged by poverty in the middle of a pandemic. This is your legacy, graduates, one in which you are called repeatedly back to serve the areas of need for the rest of your life, frankly. You're welcome. And so, the reframe of my teen angst as existentialism, the linking of my youthful hedonistic impulses with a saint who was redeemed, these intellectual frame shifts had the effect of allowing me to see how my tiny little life was part of something much larger, something holy if I really stopped to think about it. And this was the third lesson that Catalina taught me, the ability to recognize when I'm treading on hallowed ground. What do I mean by that? During this past year and a half of such chaos and loss, the willingness to see the sacred in my work has maintained my humanity, I think. I recall one encounter in the emergency department with a patient who was rapidly decompensating from respiratory failure due to COVID. She could barely speak, only a few words at a time, and she was so afraid of what was to come as I prepared to intubate her. I was afraid too. because of how sick she was and how close to dying, and I was also afraid because I knew how much aerosolized COVID was going to be generated during the procedure. In the midst of the chaos, of the medication orders being flung around, the bed being repositioned, I held her hand and told her we were going to do everything possible to keep her safe. She looked at me and said, panting, "It's been a pretty rough year for you guys, huh?" She had the wherewithal to spend what little speech she had left worrying about how the medical team around her was doing. I couldn't help but wonder where she got this compassion from and why it was being handed to me like a gem in the swirling melee. I mean it when I say that the opportunity to experience that grace, that kindness, that orientation toward others when standing on the precipice of death, that is what mission-driven work can give you the opportunity to witness. The moment of holiness tucked into the cracks of this broken world. So what will that look like for you, class of 2021? In the words of the poet Mary Oliver, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? We already know what you're capable of. In the very best of times, your teachers and administrators described you as uniquely called to social justice, to supporting the underclassmen and one another. As is often the case in disasters, those qualities that made you remarkable before made you profoundly exceptional in crisis. Over this past year and a half, the instinct to turn outward, to care and hold one another from afar as you have navigated this, that is not a lesson you will unlearn. For all of the many things that you have been denied by this awful time, you have also been given the gift of witnessing your own extraordinary response. The feelings that you had this year, when everything was dark and sad and hard, and you kept waking up, putting one foot in front of the other and caring for those around you, that is what bravery looks like. It's not bungee jumping over a river or launching yourself from a plane. It's the choice to remain engaged and not look away when disaster is all around you. It's the choice to remain in community when it would be easier to back away from the messy, complicated endeavor of other people. I hope that the Santa Catalina community will be for you, as it has been for me, a way of coming home, of returning back to this community, its values, its priorities, its focused, its hallowed grounds. These are pools you can continue to draw from throughout your life. I think it is an act of radical courage and love to stay committed to making the world a better place. More radical still, to keep coming back when you go astray, as we all do. You can do it, and you have a few thousand women who can help guide you along the way. Congratulations, class of 2021. Even as you launch forth across the country and the world, may you always come back home.